All right, I'm pulling back the curtain and I'm going to come up with a design today that is kind of locked down for how I'm going to at least start proceeding on moving everything from this lower level that's mobile up to a fixed workstation island up in the top here. A couple of key focuses are going to be better dust collection and just a better organized workflow with a giant work surface so that I can work more safely and really clean without very much dust. So I'm going to put a lot of effort into those elements of things. So it's going to be fun. I look forward to sharing this with you. I think if you watch this video and you're either dreaming of a shop, adding a new tool to your workshop, moving to a new space, or wanting to scrub your whole shop kind of like I'm doing and just kind of put everything back with a good, new, clean, fresh mindset, this process is going to be really helpful for you, and it's going to be helpful for me to be able to kind of share this with you. Hopefully it also motivates you to see kind of where these projects are going with this playlist, because I think it's going to be really fun to look back and see the development of that over time as I get that thing further along. So buckle up, I'm going to do some measurement, I'm going to share some parts of the shop that work well here with you, and get on the computer and start modeling things, and by the end of this we'll have a pretty decent model of where we're going. I don't know how many times you've done it, but very often I'll get started on something and kind of get caught up in the moment and be working, and I'll go to lunch or I'll take a break and I'll come back and be like, wow, this is a mess and I haven't really been thinking through how I could do this more effectively. It's interesting when you do videos and you watch yourself working in the video, you sort of, for me at least, I laugh at myself because I'm like, wow, I could have been a lot more organized about that when I did it. So similarly, I want to build a model of the workshop on the computer that I can really think through and I can be in, I can share it with you. It's sort of photo rendered and I can get a really good sense of where I'm headed so that when I go to build those pieces, I'm pretty confident that there'll be some changes for sure, but I can drop those in and it'll work in the big picture that I want to have.
So to get started, I'm going to work on the things that don't change at all, like the concrete floor, the concrete walls, and the ceiling. We have a pretty sophisticated model of the house from when we built it, but I want to start with a simple model that's just the box to work with, and I'll add in all the pieces inside here as I kind of lay them out and design with them and look for the interactions between them. Sometimes when you have plans of a building, they're not as useful as what's called an as-built set of plans, which is where you go measure what was actually built, because things change when you do construction. And so this will be actually pretty nice to have an accurate model. So with those dimensions, I was able to go ahead and build a basic model of the box. And so this is sort of a 3D CAD model of the floor, the walls, and the ceiling. And then I went ahead and measured out the electrical and the stakes and ended up with this model that actually looks remarkably similar to the photograph I have of when we were building the place, and that's when we were at this stage. So that's a good starting point. That's all the stuff that really is never going to move. It's kind of bolted down, screwed down, or cast in concrete. So this is the stuff that won't change. There's a couple other pieces that are bolted in, but that really are unlikely to change. And so I'll add in the stairs here, and then the racks down on the lower level. These racks are just sort of the masses, just to represent this space that's taken up by those. Go ahead and throw those in, and then I'll add in also the railing, which is also that's actually pretty flexible. So I'll probably be changing that, but wanted to get that in to start looking at it. And then beyond that, inside here, I need to add the components they're stationary. They're things that you can move, but with some effort. So for instance, the laser, it has exhaust ducting that is bolted in. It's installed. It goes outside. So that's something that's unlikely to change. The sink is also something that is very unlikely to change just because it's bolted into the plumbing. And then the lathe, which is in the corner, I'm not super fond of that lathe, but it is there, and it's kind of challenging to move, but that's probably a very good candidate. And then the milling machine is a pretty large mass. So those are the things that, yeah, I can move, but they all take quite a bit of effort to move. So starting to move into the more flexible parts, but I would say minimally flexible at this point.
All right, so I want to think through the dust collection, and the dust collector I have now it's a small one, I think it's a 1 horsepower, 1.5 horsepower sort of mobile cart. Doesn't work great, but it's the same form factor. I'd really like to get an Oneida or something that's much more substantial and may do that. So I'm going to kind of provision for that space, put this in there for now, and then if I get things done, the ducting and everything can remain the same. So I'll duct for a better collector, use this one for now. And I'm either going to place it in this corner here by the electrical panel, which I've got modeled, but I've got a port up there that I've got the exhaust going from the laser up and out now. And I'm considering building a little doghouse, just something like the size of an outhouse, and putting the dust collector in it outside. I'll show you the other side of that. There's a nice place up there. It's actually, because we're down below grade here, it's a nice spot, and it would be just a straight shot in, and then it would run. And then I have to kind of concern myself with how that's going to interact with this crane, because this crane has a big trolley on it that runs back and forth, and so I can't really duck underneath the crane girders. I just need to sort of stay up in there. I've also got the lights to contend with, but I want to get that stuff tucked in and up on top of the island so that I can drop right down on the island, so I can go all the way around the island without tripping over any power or any dust collection. So I'll step outside and I'll show you that on the other side. But I've got this exhaust fan here. It just dumps and just expels air right here from the laser. And this is we're under a big overhang, and it's really pretty protected back here, but I'm thinking I may be able to build just a small box out here, like I said, something akin to an outhouse, and put the dust collector in that. So that's a possibility too. And I've got a power drop right to here, so I'm pretty prepared for that. But for now, I just need to model and accommodate where the ducting is going to go.
All right, so here's the ducting for the exhaust for the laser in place. And then I went ahead and I modeled sort of just a theoretical dust collector that would sit outside and one that sits down in the possible space. So those are the two places the dust collector may reside. And I figured I put in the ducting coming from either one, really would come from here. And that can accommodate the crane pretty well and the lights pretty well. So I can tuck it in between the lights and the crane, come out and sit out over the top of the workstation. And the workstation, I'll probably want to line the table saw up right with the dust collection, or a route to it, so that I can drop down from the ceiling and do dust collection on the table saw. And then those two little red circles are where the floor power is. So as long as my workstation sits kind of over those in some way, I should be able to pick up power and dust collection from the ceiling and the floor and not have any obstructions as you walk around the island, which will be really super nice. All right, so the next thing to kind of consider is the overall circulation through the garage, and that's going to be something that we want to make easy to carry material through, but also just literally we walk through there to get out to the backyard, or to get to our vehicle, or to do the things that we do on the lower level here. And so I've added a little sort of a circulation path to kind of demonstrate where the path of least resistance would be through. And it's common to use sort of a circle that sort of represents what a person looks like. That's about a 3-foot circle, which is what a code compliant hallway is. So that's like a really comfortable width to walk. You can definitely do narrower than that, but that's like for if you're carrying boxes, if you're doing things. So 3 feet's a good basis. And pretty much right away, you can see that it would make more sense for me to move this stair module over one module and put the railing, these railings and stairs can be interchanged. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that, because that's something I had sort of planned. It'll afford some space down on the wall here in the lower level to store some things that are up on top now. And then it'll make carrying like a 4x8 sheet of plywood, you'll be able to walk down this corridor right up the stairs and right through. As it is now, when I've carried long things like 20-foot pieces of steel, they kind of bang into this rack in the back and they bang into the stairs, and I can kind of weave it, but it's a little bit crowded. So it just makes more sense to do that. And the only argument against that is that it takes up some space in the parking area. But this is a 24-foot deep space, and that's enough to fit our vehicles as they are, with a little bit of, a little bit less room than that 3 feet to navigate around the back of the vehicle and stuff. But that works well. So I'm going to go ahead and go physically switch that out. We'll switch the model here, and that'll give us a little bit better constraint to work with for placing some of the other objects.
So I wouldn't change much with this railing and stair system. This has worked really well. I just welded these up and got them powder coated. And there's just a couple bolts that I'm going to loosen up, and then all the pieces sit down in stake pockets that are mounted to this sort of loading dock style step in the garage floor here. So I'll move this mobile base out of the way. This is the mobile base that I'm going to eventually kind of migrate out of. I'll do a separate video on this because there's a lot of things I like about this, and it's been super useful, but I just feel like I want to have a more permanent situation that doesn't move around or anything. So I'm going to move this one around for one of its last times and switch out these railings, and I'll show you that process in a time lapse.
with that changed, I've got a much cleaner circulation path. And then that affords me sort of some space underneath the stairs here to put something that I maybe use less often or that doesn't require the headroom that some of the other stuff does. And the good candidate for that is the lathe. So I'm going to switch here to the top view and drop the lathe in and consider moving it over to underneath the stairs. So it'll fit down underneath the stairs there just fine. I've got power for it, and I can get to it and use it when I need it, but I can also roll the rolling carts that associate with it underneath the stairs to keep all that stuff out of the way. I've got the air compressor down there now, and that's a really good spot for it because it's sort of out of sight, out of mind, but I can run the hose anywhere from there. So that'll be my next move. All right, with all this stuff in place, we can finally start to kind of think through the layout. So I've got the circulation set up there, and I've got a couple other patches on the ground. The tan patch is where the dust collection is above us, so that's a good eligible spot. As long as that overlaps the island, we'll be in good shape because we can drop the dust collection down onto the island there. Again, the red dots are the power, so that we want to have the island sitting over the top of the power somewhere. And then this is sort of the first module, the table saw module of the island, and the green patch is where I've got a bunch of different modules I'm considering that will extend that table saw module for outfeed. So this is where this gets really useful because now I can kind of start to look at the interaction between these things and sort of lay this stuff up. So I'll switch to an upper view and we can look through the different choices we have. Okay, so here's a top view, and I'm using a fancy CAD program here to do this because I'm comfortable with that, but you could do this just as well with a sheet of paper. And then I've got a couple, I've got the model of the saw here, or the island with the saw, and then its sort of potential other modules there. Those could just be little pieces of paper that you cut out to scale and then lay on top of the drawing. So this can be done a bunch of different ways. It just happens to be the way I'm doing it here. It's easier for me to show you this as well. So I've got the power, I've got the mill and the sink and the laser. Those things are all going to stay where they are. This is this gray run is the ducting. So now I can kind of start to drop these things in. And originally, when I was sort of lying awake at night thinking about this, I was going to try to line up. I've got this arrow showing where the saw blade is and kind of the center of it. And so I've got that thing lining up. I originally figured I'd kind of line that up underneath the dust collection here and sit over one of the power boxes. You don't have to sit over both of them because I can route the power from either side and put it in. And I originally was thinking, well, I might as well put it down pretty close to the bottom down here. And then I have about a 4-foot space around. So this is, plenty of room to move around as a person. And then if I do sort of French cleat walls behind me, I can reach back and grab tools and use them on the island. And that actually makes good sense to me to have that stuff. Now the mill obviously is going to have to move if I do that because the mill right now is just, there's a pinch point there. And so I've got the mill and I can move it over to here. And there's some benefit to that. Like you need to be able to get around the side of the mill and to the back of it occasionally. And so I can sort of doubly use the circulation space as when I'm using the mill, I have access around there. When I'm not using the mill, I'm not wasting that space in the shop for something else. So I can get the mill out of the way and I have enough space. I've got a pretty tight, this little red circle is a 2-foot circle. That starts to get to be, that's like a narrow corridor where you can slip through, but it's harder to carry an object through it or something. So a person can pass through there pretty easily. Again, 3 feet is what you use for a hallway in a code compliant building. And then this 2-foot circle, like that gets kind of crowded by the sink there, and stand in front of the sink is fine. Using the table saw is fine, but it's a little bit crowded there. So there's some issues there. So then I started thinking about what if I switch leave the mill where it is here, switch the saw around the other direction and line it up. Then I get pretty decent, I'm over one of the power things. I've got the 3-foot clearance for the corridor or the flow on that side. I've got 3 feet here. I've got plenty of space around the laser. And then the question is where do I reach for my tools? Do I have a French cleat wall or something? And so that means that the tools and things that I'm going to need would more commonly need to be stored inside the island because I can't really reach behind me to grab things. That does allow me to have a big open space here where if I'm building a bunch of cabinets, I can store those cabinets and set them. The milling machine's down here, and I can access it from the front without interfering with the island. So that's a possibility there too. And I could push that all the way up to the 3 foot, like basically 3 feet away from that railing up on top. And I would still have the corridors. I'd still have the space to get around. I'd have space to move around the laser and the sink, and then I'd have a bigger space here. So that's another good possibility that could work. And I might even, like at this point, I can set the island up and walk around it and look at it and slide it back and forth without much issue. Another thing to think about is where is a sheet of plywood? So this is a 4x8 sheet of plywood. Where's that going to slide through on the table saw? So in this case, I'd have plenty of infeed. I could set out a couple sawhorses and infeed if I wanted to rip a piece of plywood, and it would pass all the way through and out. The railings can be removed really easily. And so if I had this is a 16-foot board, it gets pretty crowded. I can't quite cut a 16-foot board, but I can cut probably a 12-foot board, and that's probably more common. Like if I'm doing some trim or something, I might have some 12-foot pieces that I can move. So having the saw sort of central in this overall space is kind of a good idea, whether it's oriented this way or whether I flip it and orient it the other way. It's just that when I flip it and orient it the other way, I just run into collision space with the sink. So that's probably not an option. So this is kind of interesting. It's a sort of trade-off between having that back wall that reach behind and perhaps get at tools. If I slide everything way down here, I'm starting to lose the dust collection over the saw. I could then reach behind myself, but then I don't have very much infeed. So I think I'm leaning towards this orientation with the saw and everything. And so really all I need to do to kind of prepare for that is to move the mill from this location over here over to that. And that's the mill weighs, close to a ton. So there's a fair amount of effort to do that, but I can do that once and have it out of the way. And then I can start kind of setting up my station up in this area and see what that feels like and get a feel for it. So the shell game continues. I'm moving stuff around. Eventually I'm going to have to go through all this stuff. But one thing that's nice that I will keep is these rolling racks. I kind of built extended feet on these. These racks are pretty modular. You can reconfigure them in different ways for different depths of things, and they're super easy to move around. So these I will keep because it's nice to be able to, ultimately you do have a bunch of junk in your shop, whether it's used for garage or other things as well. So these are really nice to be able to sort of move stuff around and organize. So I'm going to prepare to move the mill over to here and get stuff ready to go. Okay, so now I need to move the mill over, and I'm going to do this in sort of 3 stages. I've got a bunch of black pipe here, just 6 pieces of black pipe. If you've not seen this, you can just use black pipe and you can roll remarkably heavy things on top of that pipe as long as you've got a smooth floor to work with. So I'm going to set up a couple pieces of bracing underneath here just with some dimensional lumber and use a lever to kind of pop this thing up onto the pipes, and I'm going to move it out so that it's right underneath the crane in the middle here. Then I'll use the crane to hoist it up and just spin it because I need to spin it 180 degrees. I'll drop it down, then I can sort of shimmy it over to so that it's in the right direction because I need to move over and over a little bit. So it'll be actually kind of a 4-step process. I'll move to the middle, spin it, roll it over, and then slide it back into the back. And I'll do that in time lapse. But you'll kind of see that these pipes, if you ever have a really heavy machine and you're moving it by yourself, this pipe was really inexpensive to buy. It's just black pipe, and I just bought 8-foot sections and cut it down. It's a really easy way to move remarkably heavy things. So here we go.
that took a little bit longer than I thought, but I didn't have things set up underneath. And once I kind of got the drill down, you need to have space on the ends so that you can take you can roll it off of one of the pipes and then move it over to the front. I didn't have that set up as well as I could have. But anyway, now I'm gonna pull the hoist over on the crane and see if I can't get this. I don't need to necessarily lift it up. I just need to unweight it enough that I can spin it around and get it spun 180. Two out of four. I got the crane, got it spun around. That was a little bit, I didn't quite have enough headroom to really lift it, so I had to kind of inch it around, but that was fine. I felt like if it was ever going to drop or settle, it wasn't going to go anywhere, which was nice. And now I've got it set back down on rollers, and it should roll pretty easily, and I'll feed new pipes underneath. I think I've got that set up a little bit better for this run. So I just need to move it over to get it aligned where I'm going to send it into the wall. All right, step 3 done. That's the last one is just, I am getting better at setting it up, so I'll set this up and slide it all back. And if you've been watching, there's a little tank that's the coolant reservoir, and I've been sort of dragging that around with me, so I'll kind of scooch that along as I go, get this put back, and then I'll kind of try to get it centered and leveled and everything. All right, well, I got things moved. I got the main 3 things is moving the mill, moving the lathe over to here, and then rearranging the staircase. So got a nice circulation path that seems to work well. Just as I'm even moving around in here, it works really well. And then I've got this stuff I need to go through, and it's just old materials and things that I need to get rid of or find a home for. But I'm kind of using it as sort of a shape that is, or a mass that is going to be where the workstation will be, or the island will be, at least as I've got it drawn right now. And I'll go ahead and build in my mobile station here under time lapse and show you that. I put that all together now that I've got the dogs for it and everything. And so I can start working up here and start reaching around for things and seeing where I want to put maybe things on the wall or shelving or stuff like that. So this is actually working pretty well. I know that watching me clean up isn't that much fun, but it has actually been super helpful to share with you my ideas, because it actually motivated me to do things a lot differently once I started seeing it on the screen. So thanks. I'll get this put together. All right, well, I got this put together, and there's some clearance issues. If I will probably rebuild most of these, and this is great. I'm learning a ton, but getting the knobs in there and getting the dogs connected was a little tough. There was one I had to kind of just slightly massage with the bit because it didn't quite line up well with the carcass hanging down, but everything else seemed to work pretty well. So I can put this together. I'm going to use this cabinet now as it is here in the beginning of the island, and try that a little bit. I keep learning as I go by using what I've built so far, and this is looking good, but it's still going to take some refinement to get it completely right. And hopefully the final design will learn from all the parts I've done so far. So anyway, this is going to work well. I'm curious to see if this height is a height that will work. I'm hoping that I can, keep tools stored under there that when not in use. And I like the drawers. Everything else seems to be working pretty well. I know this was really helpful for me, and they say that you don't really learn something until you teach it. And I had thought about this shop quite a bit, and then once I started laying it out to show you, I was sort of surprised at how I had to rethink a little bit of what I will do with this final thing. I'll have a fair amount of space on this side to put cabinets or things I'm working on, kind of just open space, and then I'll have this giant island here. I'm thinking I can probably put some French cleat stuff where those clamps are up on the wall, and then move my tools that I need for that particular project up there, and maybe something over on that side too, so that I can kind of stand at the island and reach for things and get to them. I'll be able to store things in drawer stacks like this underneath the cabinets as well around the island. If you've already subscribed, thanks for doing that. If you haven't, you might consider subscribing so that you can be notified with the little bell icon when new videos come up that are related to this workshop. I'll always have, like I say, I'll always have these workshop videos with a little workshop icon, and they'll say workshop in the title, because I do other videos as well. You're welcome to watch those, but if you're just interested in the workshop, stick with the playlist there. This will be chronological too, so if you want to go back and see the earlier ones, you can see those or watch the whole thing through. So it's going to be fun. I look forward to showing you more of it. Until I see you next, I'll be out building.